two, one, two, three.
Hello and welcome to Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. I'm here today with Adam Hart. He's operations manager and community organizer at the Workers Center, the Tompkins County Workers Center. We're going to be talking about May Day, now that it's Slope Day, just a few days, about a week after May Day. Adam Hart, tell us about the beginnings of May Day.
So May Day has a long history in the United States and just kind of like the global worker-led struggle. So given the time constraints, I'm going to kind of boil this down to some bare points and leave out some of the deeper history with the socialist and anarchists leading up to May Day. But so May 1st represents a day where a lot of workers came together in solidarity and fought for the 8-hour workday was their number one demand. This happened in 1886. There were about 300,000 workers nationally that went on strike, essentially, to demand a 8-hour workday. And in Chicago, which is kind of like the epicenter of the history of May Day and why it's celebrated, I think it was about 10 or 12,000 people that went on strike, which is pretty huge. The demand of the workers, there was kind of like an internal struggle between the anarchists and socialists a little bit, where the anarchists kind of thought that it was too reformist to fight for the 8-hour workday, where the socialist and a lot of the union leaders were really pushing for this, seeing this as a chief complaint of workers, where people were working 10, 14 plus hour days and just, having horrific time with other worker right violations and stuff. So while they were demonstrating outside of the McCormick factory, there was a lot of police intervention. So the demonstrations went on about 3 days. So from May 1st, and it wasn't really until May 3rd where we started to see police repression of picketers, where the police were going in and beating workers for engaging in this struggle. It was largely the demand of the bosses that were trying to break up these fights to get people back to work.
Now, you just said in front of the McCormick factory. I associate a different name for the location of things.
Yes. So after the 3rd, and they saw a lot of that police violence, there was actually an emergency meeting called at the Haymarket Square, which is where the infamous Haymarket, I hesitate to call it riot, but the Haymarket struggle happened, where the organizers called this large public meeting to talk about the police violence that they were experiencing over the past couple of days at the McCormick Works. And it was a rainy day when they called the meeting, so they didn't get quite as many people. I think it was it was only a couple thousand people, which is quite a bit lower than what had been demonstrating, given the weather and whatnot. But this was comprised of families, children. Even the mayor came out to hear the speakers and hear what's going on. So during this, there were a number of speakers, and things were overwhelmingly peaceful across the country, and specifically in these demonstrations in Chicago as well. And the mayor would actually later attest to this. But at some point, when things were kind of winding down, there was a couple of officers that thought that the speakers were trying to incite violence by using inflammatory language. So they kind of rushed the crowd, which, of course, triggered more police to rush the crowd. And at some point during that, a bomb was randomly thrown towards the police, and it went off, killing a few officers, and that kind of like amplified the police like opening fire into the crowd and ended up killing about 8 workers, though we don't entirely know the exact numbers, but dozens were injured. And to this day, we actually don't know who threw the bomb. Though that doesn't stop speculation. There's wild speculation as to who. Some people say it could have been like the police trying to incite violence. Some people say it was the anarchists. It's just like no one knows. But throughout this, there was a series of trials where I think it was like 8 of the organizers and like union leaders and anarchists got put on trial, were arrested for murder charges and got put on trial. And the jury was largely comprised of capitalists. So you can imagine how that kind of goes. And this was watched across the world. People kind of tuned in for this. In the end of it, several years went by. They really got nowhere. I think it was 4 of them were ultimately hung. One of them committed suicide as kind of a last protest. And then the remaining 3 were pardoned 6 years later. Shortly after this, we won the 8-hour workday, and there was like a struggle to kind of separate. The government really wanted to separate May Day in America from other May Day celebrations across the world, which we see this all the time, where the capitalists and the government like really wants to put a divide in working class movements and separate workers from standing in solidarity with one another. So the government actually tried, I think it was like up till the 60s or something, they made May 1st the National Law and Order Day, which, totally different than,
Yeah.
than like International Workers' Day, which
Yeah.
the rest of the world celebrates.
Well, the world, I mean, the violence was on actually a couple of days after May Day in
Yes.
1886. 3 years later, 1889, the International Socialists declared May Day the workers' holiday. And 1894, the United States declared its own Labor Day. I think some states had done it previously, but the federal government did it in 1894 to be the first Monday in September.
Yeah, so you can kind of see that divide where they really tried to like separate American workers from being in solidarity with other workers around the world. We see it time and time again with other like labor struggles and freedom struggles.
Well, I can say that Ithaca has had its long, small May Day tradition, because I can remember DSA and perhaps some labor people getting together in Stewart Park. I think I have pictures from the 1980s or maybe 1990s of several of us in down vests and jackets shivering on a freezing May Day in Stewart Park. More recently, DSA turned to doing things on the commons to be more visible. And what we've done has varied greatly. I mean, I think last year it so happened that May 1st was on a Wednesday, a day when there was a common council meeting. We held a late afternoon rally outside, and then a lot of us marched over to council to speak.
Yeah, Ithaca May Day is usually pretty fun. The past couple of years, there's been, on the Commons, it's been really fun where we've had like live music and lots of tabling, and it's been more like celebratory vibes as opposed to the traditional kind of like rally in the streets, demand more as workers. There's definitely still been demands. But yeah, it's been heavily leaning on like labor success and also still kind of fanning those flames of, the worker plight.
Okay, so let's come up to this year. And I think it's been somewhat unique And I think you have been in the middle of it.
Yeah, this year was really interesting. We tried to open up organizing May Day to be in like larger coalitions. So a lot of the labor unions have been involved in this year. You know, we've had other community orgs come in to be involved. It was an interesting practice in working in like true working class coalition, you know, where there's a lot of different opinions on what should happen. But I think ultimately in the end, we definitely kind of came together and, you know, we had a little demonstration on the Commons, and then there was a march through the streets around to DeWitt Park where we had tabling and we had speakers and music, just this more like celebratory situation. It was super fun. I think about like 500 or so people came out, which is pretty solid. Usually we only get a few hundred people.
Okay, but I think the work that led up to all this was very interesting. And I think you were probably one of the first people you said to be on it.
Yeah, usually we are the one of the first to organize. You know, we've the past couple of years we've
Who are we in this case?
So I also organize with CPUSA, and we are usually the ones like the past couple of years that have kind of like picked up the torch to like have May Day happen. And the Worker Center, of course, has been involved in this. Sorry, I wear many hats in the community, but we usually start organizing a couple months out, just knowing how long the permitting process is and all of that. And usually there's, you know, our engagement with like bringing people in is like come out, you know, have your speakers table, like let's get people plugged in and aware of what's going on either in your union or get more connected with like DSA or whatever other community group or like struggle is going on. And one of the large things that we've been kind of uplifting is part of like local labor struggle is just cause the past couple of years. That's been kind of the chief demand. A lot of the folks that came together around this year and in past years are also like unions and groups that have supported just cause. But this year, yeah, this year was a little different. We there was a lot of shifting last minute plans and trying to work in coalition and bring people in. And yeah, it was definitely a little more challenging than usual, but it was also a really fun thing to organize around. And I think ultimately in the end, it's brought us closer as a community and a coalition of sorts,
Yeah, well, I think
especially with labor.
at one point you said that the Communist Party was the first to get a permit to use the pavilion on the Commons, right?
Yeah. We usually this year we got it first. Usually we apply for the permits like in January. This year we were pretty late to the game. There's a lot going on, you know, as you can imagine with Trump and, you know, the rising threat of fascism. But yeah, we got it for the Commons, which is where we were originally gonna just kind of hold our like regular events. And we wanted to really bring in labor into this. So like the Teachers Association, UAW 2300, and a couple other CGSU, a couple other unions, we really wanted to kind of bring in like uplift this and work in coalition to put something on for Ithaca workers as a whole. So things kind of shifted a little bit, which we were very happy to work in this like broader coalition with.
I mean, I have to say, Ithaca DSA didn't start thinking of, we have several projects going, and we didn't start thinking about it till pretty much last minute. But to some extent, at that point, it was what's already being. The first thing we heard was that something was being organized in Stewart Park.
Yeah,
And
the I think there was originally plans to like have a cookout kind of thing, which basically like Labor Day, like the same as the Labor Day picnic at Stewart Park. But we set out with the goal of making a spectacle of labor, and Stewart Park has a lot of limitations around accessibility and bus lines and just overall visibility. So we kind of shifted to a more public space. We still tried really hard to get food to happen at DeWitt Park, but that was very
That
difficult
was the one thing that
against
fell
selectmen.
through.
Yeah, yeah, they
I
actually like have
remember.
a yeah, they have a lot of really interesting rules around use of DeWitt Park, and they were very flexible in letting us actually do what we did there, because it's technically a quiet use park.
So I hear about it, of course, through DSA. And so
Mhm.
we're first hearing about this thing that's rather problematic for us to. Stewart Park is problematic because it takes a while to get there. And since this isn't an official holiday, everybody has, works and goes to class. And oh gosh, one year I was on jury duty. And I remember that was the year when there was supposed to be, there was rumors of a general strike because I remember going up to the workers' center and telling the person who, in a sense, was then what you are now. And I say, I'm not going to be available. I'm on jury duty. And she's, general strike, general strike.
Yeah, there's always these like really disconnected calls
Yeah.
for general strikes that are just like a little
And
disconnected from reality, I
I
think.
think my memory is that yes, on that morning I showed up for jury duty, and by the middle of the day I'd been kicked off.
Oh no.
Well, it was a very serious and problematic murder case that I think I later heard wound up with a hung jury. That is to say, the jury could not. I remember feeling very puzzled when I went in, and the upshot was that the jury didn't decide. I think it had to go to a second trial, at which point I was no, I had done my jury duty. But let's see, that's a past May Day again. Let's get back to this year, and I'm trying to think about what I saw. So there was a general body DSA meeting, Ithaca DSA meeting, not all that long before May Day, and two non-members show up. They are from Indivisible, and they say that they are doing May Day because they got orders from their national whatever it is to do it. They didn't really know all that much about what they were doing. They just knew that they had to have some sort of an event. They were surprisingly clueless about what the whole thing was about. And what we wound up having to do in the DSA meeting was some very, sophisticated DSA member who knew all about the history of May Day, and also was good at using parliamentary procedure correctly, calls out point of in, I think it was our Beth. Point of information. Why would unions be involved in May Day? Which of course, then she pretends not to know, and somebody else jumps in and gives a very short version of the story and explains that it's a labor holiday, which Indivisible apparently didn't know.
Yeah, I would say a lot of that was kind of our experience as well. They really kind of came in and was like, "This is our thing," and it's like, well, there's always national calls for May Day specifically, and like May Day is a very historic like international holiday. So yeah, there's definitely that disconnection. And I think that goes to what we were talking about earlier, that like intentional kind of government attempt to like completely separate labor solidarity and like bury the history of May Day.
I
You
think the
know,
word is suppression.
suppression, yes, yeah, they've done a great job. So many workers in the U.S. like don't know the history of May Day, don't know that the rest of the world celebrates like what happened in Chicago. That was huge, and that's a significant part of our history and why we are able to organize the way we do and why we have an 8-hour workday and like all these other things.
But we're
Um,
losing it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, anyway, let's see. So, what finally comes out is that Indivisible sort of takes over the rally on the Commons. I must say, I could not really follow what was going on in the rally just because of where I had placed, my own fault. I had placed myself in, or let's say I had picked the wrong place to stand at one end of the Ithaca DSA banner,
Yeah.
having found another Ithaca DSA person who could hold the other end. And I think you got messages from me that I was not going to be available to hold two banners.
Yeah, yeah, we asked you to hold the Worker Center banner. Luckily, one of our interns was able to jump in, and some other community members
Yeah.
that have engagement with us.
So definitely, DSA had their banner there. The Workers Center had their banner there. The Indivisible did their play. As I say, I could not hear at all and couldn't really see either. Then led off the march to DeWitt Park, which they did in a slightly circuitous way, so as to have
Yeah,
more.
what was your experience with that march?
Well, there my experience was quite happy. I was very near because of where I had stationed myself. They
Were
set
you
out north on Tioga Street, and I was very near to that. We, two of us.
Yeah, I
So
was in the front of that march, and we had our banner right up front, the Worker Center banner, and we were leading the chants, and we were having a great time up front, trying to bring the energy up. Of
yeah,
course, it sounded like towards the back there was more like of a somber like chanting vibe from the Statue of Liberty people. But we were having a great time up in the front, and we did our march, and we took the long way to DeWitt Park. In DeWitt Park, we were met with really great labor music, and yeah, just kind of tried to bring up the spirits a little bit of what we were doing, and the goal that we set out to celebrate local labor.
when I got there, I quickly joined up with two tables, but also got a chance to walk around and just spell off the tablers. And there were speeches. Different unions talked about their
Yeah. Yeah, we had
negotiations.
the Ithaca Teachers Association. We had CGSU speak. We had someone from the Workers Center. We had someone from the Communist Party. I think that maybe that was it. Maybe we just had four speakers. I know we originally had more, but I think, a lot of these things tend to be very speaker heavy, and it doesn't really give a lot of time for engaging in tabling or like, just like general kind of discussion and like community building. So we try to limit that and separate it with some music and other stuff so that way people could engage with a lot of the tables. Because we had a lot of tablers. It was pretty good.
Yeah. And a lot of petitions and signatures
So
and
many petitions.
useful conversations. It was very good. Now, I know you said that one of the speakers addressed just cause and that you think that's particularly important. So maybe you can just say what it is.
Yeah, yeah. So we had the Worker Center and CPUSA both kind of harped on Just Cause since that's two of the priority campaigns. So Just Cause aims to kind of reform at-will employment or do away with at-will employment, really. At-will employment is kind of the status quo across the US where you can be terminated for any reason short of discrimination, and even that is laughably easy to get around. So we really want kind of what unions have. Unions have just cause. Like you need a valid reason to terminate someone. You can't just arbitrarily fire someone because you don't like them or they aren't like pulling their weight or like whatever. You have to go through certain processes in discussions to like identify the problem or what have you, but you can't just like fire people. And this actually is really good for businesses. A lot of the rest of the developed Western world like has similar protections, and like I said, most unions have this. And this is actually something that was passed in New York City. I think it was like 2019 or something. But yeah, I mean, it would be a huge win for employees and like workers in Ithaca.
City of Ithaca is where they're trying to do it, I believe.
Yes, yeah, the city of Ithaca.
And
We hope to expand,
yeah,
but yeah, right now we're focused on the
eh,
city of Ithaca.
thank you, Adam Hart. We've exchanged our Mayday experiences. This has been Ithaca DSA Presents. I'm Theresa Alt. Thanks for watching.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.